Welcome. I'm Dr. Lauren Young. I am a naturopathic physician in Manchester, Connecticut. I am medical staff with ECHN, which I'm very proud of. And I am also clinical faculty with the residency program for University of New England. So I do a lot of evidence-based care using lifestyle medicine and various nutritional programs like the fasting mimicking diet that we're going to talk about tonight. Let's see, advanced slides. There we go. So just as a quick disclaimer, this is a lot of information on the how-tos and whys of fasting mimicking diet, but we really want to make sure that you're talking to your clinicians about this. So if you have questions, there's a lot of resources online I recommend, and also for your physician should know about it. I wouldn't go straight to Facebook groups. I would also make sure your doctor knows what's going on, but it can be a very therapeutic diet. And it's really interesting research, which is why I'm wanting to dive into it with everyone today. So if you probably have heard a little bit about fasting, fasting was a huge part of human history, of a very cultural norm. A lot of times religious groups and cultural groups will do periods of fasting for many different reasons, and it's been a piece of human existence for a very long time. It wasn't until we started learning about blood sugar, and honestly there's a lot of money behind big breakfast. There's a lot of research that's saying breakfast is really important, but then we were finding that actually periods of fasting were extremely important for our bodies. And so now, if you had seen me 15 years ago, I would have said, have breakfast within a half hour of waking up and make sure you're eating every 2 to 3 hours. And now fasting is back and more popular than ever and having a lot of research behind it. So I would say, I would turn that on its head and say it's probably the opposite is true. Like now, most of the doctors in my practice skip breakfast and eat a little bit later, giving a larger window of time to let your body rest and digest. And intermittent fasting has become incredibly popular. So I thought this was super interesting research looking at trending diets over time. Gluten-free is still extremely popular, and intermittent fasting is all the rage for sure. And so this is like an extension off of intermittent fasting and research on fasting in general. So it's funny to call it fasting and a diet, because fasting typically you don't think of food when you think of it. So some really great research on looking at not just weight loss and metabolism, but anti-aging, anti-cancer, anti-dementia and cognitive decline, helping with cardiovascular system. There's a lot of really great research coming out on intermittent fasting and fasting mimicking. And so we're going to talk about a lot of that today. So how can you have a diet where you fast, right? That is like it seems like they're opposites, right? So when we think of the definition of food, it's like you're not consuming and that's fasting. But the truth is that physiologically, we can fast and stop feeding off of glucose and switch over to ketones. And then there's also a lot of pathways that we're not going to do too deep of a dive into, but there's a lot of pathways in our body that are stimulated by a certain amount of nutrients and certain types of nutrients that if we keep our body less stimulated, it kind of keeps a lot of pathways being able to act like we're fasting without us actually fasting. So whether it's switching over to ketones as a fuel source, and we'll talk more about what that is and how that happens, or just absence of triggering nutrient sensing pathways, which basically allows for less stress on your nervous system. So it is a tremendous amount of energy, calories, fuel, a lot of things have to happen for us to take something from the environment and assimilate it into our cells. And so this diet allows a break from that process, and a lot of wonderful things happen when we do that. So here's a breakdown of fasting in general. And so we've talked in the past about intermittent fasting. I believe we have a recording of that somewhere. If not, it's definitely on my website that you could find, because again, Chantel does a great job at editing all this. There's a breakdown of the types of fasts you can do with intermittent fasting. And then there's prolonged periods of fasts, which for a long time was mostly done with water fasts, which definitely has its downfalls, which we'll talk about. And now there's this research showing that you can do a fasting mimicking diet, that's more like a prolonged fast. You get a lot of benefits from that, but less of the pitfalls of having a water fast where you're having no food whatsoever. So just to recap on fasting in general, this is kind of what happens to our bodies as we are fasting. I'll move my screen a little bit so I can see it. So as we're not eating, and I would say phase 1 is probably the first 12 to 24 hours, we're burning up our glycogen stores. Those are like, think about it like sugar stores around your body that your body keeps a little like, you like leave snack packs in your car or in your desk. These are like your snack packs in your organs. It's your glycogen stores. So we burn up those the first like 14 hours or so, which is why intermittent fasting is so incredibly beneficial. And then, what happens is we're also seeing that your body is like, oh, we're out of calories, out of glycogen, slow down the metabolism. And in the beginning, like, there's a little bit of weight loss, and then it's like slow down the weight loss. But what we find is once you get past a certain phase of fasting, you actually get this benefit of clearing up any kind of, your metabolic rate kind of kicks up. You actually are clearing more stuff, and you can still you can improve insulin resistance even more. So there's like a phase beyond the intermittent fasting phase where we can get to some really therapeutic stuff. And again, this is stuff you do with a doctor involved, but can be really therapeutic and beneficial. And it's fairly easy to get to. We're talking like 4 or 5 days, not crazy amounts of time. So this is what all the dynamics and all the things that are changing in your body as we're going from, eating whatever we want to refraining from food. Again, just breaking down the different ways of doing fasting. So we're doing intermittent fasting where we're eating some meals and then kind of restricting to a window of time that we're consuming. And then, you can time restrict and can even go even more small like that. So you're eating smaller meals throughout in a smaller window of time, so that we are creating like a larger span of time where you're resting your GI tract and therefore depleting those glycogen stores. And as we'll say, that the main awesome thing in a second that we'll talk about, which is why the fasting mimicking diet is getting so much research behind it. So again, these are just different ways of looking at how to fast, doing it 5 days a week, 4 days a week, 2 days a week, doing something else, or fasting entirely, doing like one meal a day. There's lots of different variations that you can look back on if you want to. So one of the things we're finding with water fast and really going for a longer period of time with no calorie intake is a lot of these great things happen in the body. So I want to kind of emphasize on a couple of these. Enhanced neuroplasticity. So neuroplasticity is your brain's ability to kind of like create new pathways, like let the neurons in your brain be flexible. And so we're finding that getting the glycogen stores low in our brain at points allows for some flexibility with our neurotransmitters, which is awesome. Again, your body's going to break down body fat, build more, get more metabolically active. Your GI tract is going to require less uptake and less cell turnover. Your insulin sensitivity is going to go up. Basically, your body wants to be able to be sensitive for any sugar it does see. So it gets, your insulin resistance goes down. And the big thing we're going to talk about is autophagy and your and mTOR going down and your autophagy going up, which is your body cleans up any kind of debris and issues that it might have on a cellular level. Additionally, there's research showing that your heart rate variability, which is one of the biggest predictors of longevity, that improves. Your heart rate can go down, your blood pressure can go down, lots of great stuff for your cardiovascular system. So this looks great, right? Except for there's some pitfalls to water fasting, and fasting can be difficult. So this is why we're finding a way to do it with food. The biggest thing I mentioned a second ago, autophagy. If you get nothing else from this talk, we're going to talk autophagy. It was the reason for the Nobel Prize in 2016. It was a huge finding that cells will clean up themselves and clean up debris and get rid of damaged proteins and things like that. Basically do like a spring cleaning when you're in fasting as like an innate way to recycle. This can help with inflammation. This can help with immune function. This can help with longevity and cellular health. So this was a huge finding and a big deal in science, and a big part of what drove the research in fasting and drives a lot of the research in this field. Is anti-aging is something we all would love to learn more about, right? So autophagy, how you want to think of it is, you know, there's different analogies. You could think of it as like when a business is growing, they're busy, they're taking on stuff. Sometimes they take on stuff too quickly and they're growing too quickly. And then when there's a bit of a recession or a slow time for the business, they might tighten the reins a little bit and be like, all right, do we really need to be buying all this stuff? Do we really need to be doing this? Let's get down to what we actually need for the business to be healthy. And so this is kind of what cells do. When things quiet down as far as metabolic production, where sugar, go, all of a sudden less sugar, less calories, less food. All right, is that protein working the way it should? That organelle working the way it should? Autophagy is basically like, a consulting group coming in and making sure everyone's job is, I mean, this makes it sound like a bad thing, but it's a really way of making sure your cells are being efficient and we get rid of any of the excess junk that shouldn't be there. And turns out that has a tremendous amount of benefits for you cellularly. So this is where I would go into a lot of like science around this. We'll jump through this. If you are a sciencey person, there's lots of fun stuff here from cellular biology class. Essentially, a lot of different systems in our body, like autophagy, and autophagy overall will decrease with age. As we get older, our body's less quick to do introspection and make sure all these cells are doing what they're supposed to and clearing out what they should. And debris can lay around, old organelles, which are like it's like the organs in your cells. Those can kind of linger, and that can lead to burdens on your immune system, burdens on your cellular system, and issues. So that's one of the reasons why we want to really promote autophagy in our bodies. So we kind of broke down intermittent fasting and then this prolonged periodic fasting, which could either do with water, or what they're finding is some great research that you can do it with food, but in a way that does not stimulate all those systems, so you're still promoting autophagy. And there's a tremendous amount of research on this. Why not water fast? I am not a huge fan of water fasting for the reasons listed. Food's important, and while we can fast, water fasting can be difficult. I don't know if you guys have tried to go any amount of time without food. I've done variations of this, and then you're still making chicken nuggets for your kids or whatever, and you accidentally pop one in your mouth and you're like, there goes my water fast. So that piece of things makes it difficult just doing it. And then there are some safety issues. Main side effects of water fasting that we want to be careful of is that your blood sugar, your blood pressure can go too low. You could lose some muscle mass since you're not getting any protein in, and you want to make sure your body's, you're going for an amount of time without nutrients. You actually can get dehydrated because it's hard to drink enough water. You're used to getting about 20% of your water from food. And so all of a sudden you're doing it all from water. So actually some people get dehydrated with water fast. And if you do burn a lot of body fat, it's putting a lot of burden on your gallbladder, which could create gallstones because you're not having a lot of fiber to help clear that. Plus the main side effect, which is hunger, because water does not cut it the same way. So that's where this guy, Dr. Longo, whose company contacted me last week when they saw that I was doing a talk on this, did all this research. They've put a tremendous amount of research and money into exploring fasting mimicking diets, because there's a lot of interest in, look, with the diseases I listed off that this can impact, right? Diabetes, cardiovascular, dementia. There's especially there's a lot of conditions where this can be really profoundly effective and doesn't cost a lot of money and can certainly be a great thing to test. So there's a lot of research behind this, and I'm happy to send you guys more studies if you have a specific topic you want to dive into with this. But this is the guy who kind of pioneered it all out in UCLA. So how does it work? So right now, when you eat food, that baked potato looks delicious. If it was from the Big E, it would even have more sour cream on it, right? So then your cells are getting plenty of nutrients. They're in growth phase. They're not paying attention to stuff, and nothing gets kind of looked at. There's no internal work for your cells. They just kind of fat and happy, keep moving forward. When you're doing fasting, that nutrient sensing pathways don't get activated. And it does do that cleanup. But again, that plate does not look very satisfying or doable. This isn't quite what the plate looks like, but you get the idea that doing a fasting mimicking diet, you have some food, some nutrients, and it doesn't trigger the shutting off autophagy, so your cells still do some level of cleanup. So what is this diet? Now that I'm talking about all the great research behind it, really it's making sure you're getting nutrients, very nutrient dense foods, very like low calorie count. It's not a tremendous amount of foods, and it's all plant-based. And there's some research behind why they chose the things they chose for this that we're going to talk into it. So typically we do a fasting mimicking diet for 4 to 5 days with the goals of getting all the benefits of a fasting state, getting into ketogenesis, so making fuel from ketone bodies instead of glucose. And then what that's going to do is kind of, you know, clear the glucose out of your brain, clear all the glycogen stores out, you know, get rid of all the snack packs that your organs have hidden around. And then with that, your cells start doing a little clean out as well. And it kind of gives you this like hard reset for your GI tract and for your cells. Again, there's lots of benefits to this. Your nervous system can get a nice reset. Insulin resistance goes down. You're going to break up fat cells. So there's definitely a weight loss component that we'll talk about with this. Your GI tract requires less energy. Inflammation goes down. You know, everything kind of quiets down a little bit and does like spring cleaning, which is awesome. There's some really great parts in your brain that get affected in wonderful ways. Again, with that neuroplasticity, reducing oxidative stress, reducing stress in the body in general. So these are some of the great things that we're seeing happening when we're doing this diet. I keep bringing up ketogenic. So I wanted to make sure you guys understood that this is not just a ketogenic diet. And these are kind of the comparisons. Ketogenic can be much longer. Fasting mimicking, usually max 5 days. Both are low in carbs, both are high in good fats. Typically fasting mimicking doesn't have as much like emphasis on protein. It's a little like more limited, and it's more calorie restrictive. There's a little more fasting involved with it. Typically you still do intermittent fasting, and then you kind of are mindful of your food groups and consumption of food. But again, the goals of it, yes, there's a metabolic benefit, but we're looking at all of these other benefits as far as, you know, cellular health and neurological health, GI health, those type of things. So one of the things we're seeing is stem cells love fasting. And so there's some really interesting research showing you that basically doing a fasting episodes, like, you know, on a monthly basis, a lot of this research is doing it, you know, 4 to 5 days, once a month for 3 months is the typical, that they're finding some improvement in stem cell function, which is pretty amazing as well. This slide kind of breaks down the, you know, intermittent fasting can obviously help a lot with metabolic. We talked about all the insulin resistance, those kind of things, boosting the Krebs cycle. Autophagy really starts kicking in at like 2 or 3 days, going into 4 or 5, where we're getting all these benefits of your cells really doing some house cleaning, and then stimulating on it like an anti-aging level, your cell health. So there's a lot of reduction in oxidative stress and inflammation. Again, oxidative stress can come a lot from the demands of processing calories. And so when you're reducing your calorie intake and really reducing the burden on your GI tract, it reduces the burden on your whole body in a lot of ways. Cool study. There's lots of cool studies around this. They are exploring this. There's a tremendous amount of research happening in a lot of different arenas when it comes to this. More research on it. I will kind of jump. So there's a couple things. Some people have been worried about, am I going to lose muscle with this? Is it going to impact my exercise? Those type of things. What we found is there is oftentimes weight loss associated with eating less calories and doing a diet like this, but there's not loss of body fat. I mean, body muscle, only body fat. So that's a good thing for most of us. There's some really great research on improving blood pressure. And again, IGF-1 is a marker of healthy cell aging. And again, that's another way to show that we're seeing benefits from doing this diet. I promise I'll tell you what the diet actually is. I'm not going to just go over how great it is and hype it for an hour. So again, a lot of people are concerned about doing this who are already training and exercising. Is this something I should be doing if I'm doing CrossFit as well? They're showing that lean muscle mass is often preserved, and that we are not taking away protein from the body when we're doing a dietary program like this. I wanted to address also that there are concerns often. There was one study looking at should women be doing intermittent fasting, because there was one study that suggested that it could be more strenuous on women's bodies. And so while women can go into ketosis quicker, realistically, I think that the benefits from intermittent fasting and from fasting mimicking diets far outweigh that. And so, there may be some thoughts of only doing fasting during certain parts of your cycle where it would be less straining on the body. So there's some research suggesting that as well, which, I think everything has its season. If you're doing something really strenuous, or if your body's feeling strained, or if you're, again, there's contraindications across the board with every kind of diet. If you're planning on getting pregnant, that's certainly one of them as well. So I would suggest, looking at doing the fasting during the first part of your cycle. So for women, real quick, sorry guys, the first part of your cycle, basically after your period starts, that's day 1, the first 14 days, give or take, is the first part of your cycle. That is a better time to do this type of fast if you're going to. It's more of like you're young, more like you can exert yourself more, that type of thing. The second half of your cycle is when it would be a little more straining on your body. Again, this is a little bit of research, a lot of hypothetical, but why not? You'll still have a time a month that you could be doing this. So how did Dr. Longo come up with this? And I promise, other than the phone call or the conversation last week, I don't really know this guy other than I know his research. It started with looking at the Mediterranean diet. Again, heavily researched diet, lots of great stuff about it. I think most of us have heard of a Mediterranean diet. It's hard to argue that all of that isn't great for you. And so really heavy in healthy fats and fiber and vegetables. So it's a great whole foods diet in general. So that was kind of part of the research looking at it, that we found that overall, it's a really wonderful diet to help with cardiovascular health and reducing incidence of diseases. So one of the things we're going to dive into pretty quickly is just in general studying longevity, because that is again a hot topic in the research world. So there's some interesting research that high animal protein and is considered more at risk for cardiovascular issues, more at risk for issues around longevity. And then high plant protein is the opposite, where it was found to be more beneficial. So that's part of why the fasting mimicking diet is more driven around plant-based. So again, high protein diets are more associated with mortality in some cases in research, and low protein diets are actually also associated with issues with longevity. So it's kind of like find that sweet spot in the middle with protein and have it be mostly plant-based, nuts being a great source of them. So this is one study where they looked at a lot of nurses, 76,000 nurses that they studied over time, and looked at and found that associations with eating a lot of nuts and seeds are going to have really healthy fats, fiber, protein, and there's more longevity and better mortality rates associated with eating more nuts. So it's actually a lot of great nut studies out there. So after this, if you guys are going to couch up and watch something on Netflix, I highly recommend looking up the Blue Zones. It's called something else on Netflix, but if you look up Blue Zones, you'll find it. Basically, there's a book called The Blue Zones where they've looked at different parts of the world where there's longevity and quality of life and not a lot of health concerns. People are living into their hundreds without a lot of chronic disease, Okinawa being one of them. And they're looking at the diets and lifestyle of these people. Super interesting program. I'm actually thinking of doing a group next session. I just sent Chantel the information. Maybe we'll do a book club where we all read the book and then just kind of meet around all of this. But one of them is the Okinawa. That's actually the first episode is on the Okinawa diet. And it looks at eating a lot of sweet potatoes, which is really interesting. They eat these like purple sweet potatoes that are high in fiber, high in nutrients. And if you look at this diet, it's a lot of vegetables. Protein is there in meat, fish, and poultry, but it's beans, it's vegetables, and so what we're going to find when we look at a lot of these diets, so there's more research on like, yeah, they're living a long time and like not a lot of cancer or heart disease. You know, the ones really high up there are the US, and then Okinawa is even better than all the Japanese ones, super low risk of heart disease, cancers, things like that. So these are other blue zones in the country, in the world, where we look at their diets and they're high in vegetables, fruit, fiber, phytonutrients, not crazy amounts of protein from animals, but a lot of plant proteins, and really low in sugar and processed foods, lots of healthy fats. So there's a theme with all of these. And like I said, we'll send out the slides. You can feel free to compare them if you want. But essentially, Michael Poulin's is a great medical writer. And he's like, you know, eat a lot of plants often. You know, plants are good for you. So that's a lot of what this is. So this is the diet itself is really focusing on a lot of plant and fish-based protein, if you're going to do it, essentially heavily on plants, low protein for these 5 days, minimizing processed foods, of course, and making sure you're feeling nourished, but again, with high nutrient foods. So the specific is really to do intermittent fasting, high vegetable, medium to low protein, and to limit the number of calories per day. And there's you know, Dr. Longo has programs. There's different other fasting mimicking diet resources out there to give you the exacts around it all, but you can look at, you're having snacks but smaller amounts, and you basically eat a substantial less calories for just those 5 days. And what we found is that really, again, is going to kick you into that autophagy. So again, comparing the longevity diet, which is the book, again, we could do another book club with that one as well, where he wrote up all his research on the fasting mimicking diet. Comparing it's like, again, low sugar, low processed carbs, high complex, high fiber, high healthy fats, low processed, low saturated fats, and like, again, on the low side as far as animal proteins, which is interesting. But really effective at kicking into all those benefits we were talking about. So the way of looking at this is essentially, you know, intermittent fasting offers us a lot of great benefits to metabolic support, weight. But when we're looking at doing fasting mimicking, it's like on a whole nother level of helping cellular support, anti-aging, and helping neurological conditions, cardiovascular on a whole different level. Other things that you can get from the Blue Zones books and other research in general when it comes to looking at these areas of the world where there's a lot of quality of life without chronic disease. There's stress management, exercise, sleep. One of the biggest things I would argue is community and staying connected to each other, and hence me doing these kind of lectures for you guys, right? Volunteering, giving of yourself, feeling part of something is definitely one of the themes they find across all these different places in the world where people have benefits. Socializing, laughing, enjoying, feeling joy. So, and obviously not leaning on vices like alcohol, tobacco, or caffeine. So movement is a big piece of it as well. Sleep, balance, essentially. A lot of things that we have to put a lot of intention around or it doesn't happen for us, you know? So reminder that like with reducing your caloric intake for those 5 days, other things that can really help your stem cells, that can help your cell health, that can help detox and all the rest of it is movement, sleep. These are like all no does. and feeling connected. Like that piece of things is really incredibly important. So just to recap, that the fasting mimicking or longevity diet is essentially calorie restrictive using intermittent fasting for a 5-day stint where you're not stimulating your GI tract, but also stimulating your nutrient sensing pathways to kick into gear so that your body has time to do like some spring cleaning essentially. And the research shows that doing that once a month for 3 months, and then you can kind of do a maintenance of every few months doing it again, 4 to 5 days, can be extremely beneficial.